America is in danger because for decades, merit was exchanged for fairness. It's a beautiful impulse, but a terrible strategy. Our institutions got bloated, dumb, and soft. And culturally, we lost the will to build right as China became a global powerhouse. While the West tore itself apart, China played the long game, assembling the factories, the energy, the refineries, and the weapons needed to win any kind of war. While most slept, today's guests saw it coming and reacted. Joe Lonsdale is one of the most prolific billionaire tech founders, and he's attempting to safeguard America's future. He's building defense technology to take down drone swarms, autonomous ships to control the seas, and a new elite university to train the next generation of courageous leaders. This isn't politics, it's preparation. To discuss the threats and the solutions, I bring you Joe Lonsdale. You've really been heads down on defense tech, founding a university, preparing for a world, quite frankly, where China may no longer just be a rival, but an open threat. What did you see that made you realize we're not ready?
I was in the naive pro-China camp 15, 20 years ago. I love working with the talent in China. There's so many great people there. And none of us knew for sure when Xi Jinping came on, he was going to be this bad. But it quickly became clear that we weren't allowed to build things there and that this guy had no interest in free markets and no interest in being our friend. It became clear he was a real communist. And, a lot of our friends there were being forced to have their top engineers work for the military. People started disappearing. I lost a lot of friends who had worked between the two countries. If you were wealthy and successful and Chinese and you didn't agree with CCP, sometimes you died in your sleep in your 40s.
Were there any commonalities in terms of the people that died in their sleep, what they were working on?
One of the biggest things with the crackdown that was maybe just a few years ago was it had become a lot cooler in China to go work in tech. And that sounds normal to us here, but that's not how it was there. For 20 years in China, this brightest kids wanted to be in the government because the government were the most powerful. They're the wealthiest. And so really like having the civil service exam and the top smart people work for government. But government was becoming less and less cool because tech was becoming a place you can make more money, work on harder problems. And I think Xi Jinping got really jealous of these guys. Some of them would speak out against him. Some of them would say they're the powerful ones. And so I think he decided to take them down a notch and really, eliminated dozens of them. Just for the fact, if you're going public with a multi-billion dollar company you created and you didn't agree with the government on everything and you told them, no, we want to have some of our data outside of China, the stuff that's outside of China, like that, those guys just disappeared and the companies got back into the control of the CCP.
That's crazy. Now, you've been working in defense for a while. What was it that first made you go, hold on a second, like we've really got to start looking at US's ability to defend itself? Was it about China or was it just a general sentiment?
Well, my very first company I started in defense was Palantir, which was 22 years ago. And to be honest, that was at a time when I was still somewhat naive about China. We knew long term they could be a problem. I didn't think it'd be this quickly. The challenge then was really Islamism and was really the terror attacks of 9/11 and the fact that there were several thousand kind of people that wanted to do us harm and that were planning to do us harm again. And so that was such a major issue. And also that the US, after the Cold War, had basically started, really to decay in terms of our defense sector, but also in terms of our software sector. So when I was at PayPal as a kid, the bad guys were the Chinese and the Russian mafia. You had to stop them from stealing your money. And we had to build all these advanced new systems in Silicon Valley, right around 1999, 2000, 2001. And there were a lot of big breakthroughs for how you go after these guys, how you stop fraud, how you do investigations with tech. And after 9/11 happened, the US government spent tens of billions of dollars on its own software, but it was all done with these contractors that were basically from the 1980s. And so it was all stuff that was 20 years out of date, that was way behind Silicon Valley. And my friends and I said, wait a second, this is violating civil liberties. It's not actually even working to catch the bad guys. It's a joke compared to what we're doing in Silicon Valley. We got to go help these people and defend our country.
Elon jokes a lot about, hey, really, I'm just tech support here in my Doge capacity. How real is that? That sounds like you guys put your finger on that a long time ago, that we had these decaying systems. Is that like a primary threat for us?
It's a major problem for the U.S. government in so many areas. I'd separate it out a little bit. So America had the best and brightest people in the defense world for a long time. We had the top companies in the 20th century. We were completely dominant, right? In Operation Desert Storm in that first Iraq war in the early 90s. So much so that I think a lot of us, like our whole view of the US is like, yeah, we're number one and we're way ahead. And the problem is then after that, of course, budgets had to be cut after the end of the Cold War. And so you had this massive consolidation where all these companies kind of merged into what we call the primes. And so these like 8 or 9 big companies came from a merger of like 70 or 80, smaller to medium-sized defense companies. And then you had the tech bubble. So you had all this really cool opportunity for great engineers. And so a lot of the best engineers left the primes to go work in tech. And then these things just start to decay. They've really become like bureaucratic arms of the government. And so the defense part has just gotten more and more broken here. But the other really important point is that American government was really competent in the mid 20th century. It did some things that no one else could do. We fought the 2 world wars. We went to the moon. It turns out that we used to have really hard tests to run things to the U.S. government. So if you go, allow me to go back a little bit. In the 19th century, the government grew a lot after the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln created a lot of new departments. Central government all of a sudden became like a much bigger thing in the 1860s and 70s. And by the time of 1883, it was a mess. Everyone agreed this is a mess because whoever wins the presidency just brings in all of their friends, all of their cronies, their stupid cousin Vinny, whoever else. They're all getting paid a ton of money just to hang out in DC and not get anything done. So they said, guys, we need to have tests. We need to have merit. We need to actually say that people running things need to be really smart. So we put in these tests with the Pendleton Act in 1883. And these tests were there all the way through the moon landing, through everything. And then come the late 1970s, our country's become very politicized around affirmative action. It turns out these tests have different results on average for different races. They weren't racist tests, by the way. Everyone agreed that the tests actually measured your performance. But they said, despite that, the activist courts on the left said no more tests. So around 1980 or so, they threw out the tests.
I didn't know that.
And then, by the way, they didn't just throw out the test. They made it almost impossible to fire people. They put in like massive protections where it's really hard and slow to fire people. And so starting in 1980, our government is not able to do tests anymore, not able to do merit. It just starts getting dumber slowly over time, dumber and dumber and dumber. So for 45 years, our government's been getting dumber.
That is interesting. One of the great revelations of my adult life, and this actually bothers me, but is the degree to which intelligence matters. What role do you think intelligence plays full stop, whether you're trying to improve the government, whether you're trying to be the baddest kid on the international block, or you're trying to build a company?
Yeah, no, this is a really important point because obviously intelligence isn't everything. I think integrity, I think faith, I think why you care about the world matters. I think your motives matter to help people. But if you actually want to be effective at whatever those motives are, intelligence is absolutely central. Merit is absolutely central. If you look at the very top companies versus an average company, you have the best and the brightest. I mean, Palantir started off with a bunch of these math champions and chess champions, just like the best people out of the PhD programs at Stanford and MIT and other places. And they brought their smartest friends who brought their smartest friends. And that's just a huge advantage in the tech world with the very, very top companies. You don't see just like average people there. You see just extraordinarily bright minds. And that 3, 4, 5th standard deviation of skill. It's the same way, by the way, if you want to have the Oakland A's be a top baseball team, if you want to have a top basketball team, you can't just have an average guy on the team. You need the very, very best, the top merit in that area. That's how you win. And in some cases, it's a skill in sports and other areas. In some cases, it's IQ. And IQ matters a lot for what we're doing.
So what went wrong? How did, as a country, we go from we're testing people, we want merit, to not? And I think everybody will hear that question knowing we're a little bit on the other side of this now. The pendulum is definitely swinging back. But to protect against that decades-long problem, define it for me.
The problem is if you focus on these hard tests, if you focus on merit, then you get a very different demographic result. And this is just the nature of it, right? And this is where the country is. You're going to get more Asians, more Indians and Chinese and more Jews and then more white people. And you're going to get fewer of other groups. And that's just where we are right now. It's not a value judgment. That's just the data very, very clearly. And that's going to be the case
that we can replicate or learn from. Is it just there's so many Chinese and Indians that they're likely to have a ton of geniuses? Obviously, that doesn't work for Jews because there's so few of them. But there is something. And is it replicatable?
I think you have to realize how immigration works. It's not just the immigration is like this magical thing that just happened. Like the people who came to the United States from India, from China, tends to be a lot of the brightest people and a lot of the hardest working people. You have places with over 1 billion people, and it's a very good selection effect. So how do you get out? How do you go to a place where you know you're going to have to work hard? And how do you be smart enough to get there? and the classes of people who came and who brought their friends and family, turns out we have a very, very strong immigrant culture from those places. There's different ways different people came to the United States. It's very politically incorrect. But if you're paying people in Haiti who are desperately poor and you're giving them free plane tickets and you're giving them cash cards with $10,000, $20,000 on them, as the last administration was for hundreds of thousands of these people who, that those are not going to be the most excellent immigrants versus people who figure out how to come here themselves, right? So I think things like that are politically incorrect, but if you use the logic to piece through it, you start to get a sense of why there's different results.
So there's a great quote that all it takes for evil to reign is for good men to remain silent. How much of where we got to is that? Do you think people saw like, hey, wait a second, getting rid of merit is really stupid? Or were we all under some mass delusion?
This was a major legal political battle at the court level. And so what happened is that our country was set up by the founders to have Congress be the most powerful part. And the courts were supposed to be a check that interpreted the Constitution. What happened is there was a group on the left that were what are called activists. They had a different view of the world. They said, we're going to use the courts to push our vision. And they got a lot of people in there, and then they used the courts. And it was a big argument at the time. A lot of people on the moderate side and the right side said, this is insane. It's not the role of the courts. They said, this is dangerous. You're not letting us do what we're doing to hire the best and brightest in these areas. But it turns out that even then, the legacy media was more biased kind of to go along with the left and not really call out this crisis and not really echo the worries of the right. And so the left won at that battle. And this is a consequence of what happened with our culture of the left winning at that battle and not letting us consider merit in government. And even today, it's like obviously broken, but they don't talk about it that way because it's too offensive, I guess. And by the way, it's like there's dumb white people, by the way. This is not a racist thing. Like if you don't have tests, you get dumb everyone.
I've met a few.
It's like,
yeah.
But I mean, in the government especially, it's not that just like this is not like a racist thing. It's just like you need tests. Otherwise all the wrong people get in and all the wrong people become leaders, and it becomes very political. So here's what happens. If you don't have a merit-based system, instead you have like a political virtue signaling based system. And so the people who get ahead are the ones that are the best politicians. They're the ones who signal to their tribe. And so a lot of this like DEI, ESG, like virtue signaling stuff is like them signaling that I'm on your team, I'm safe to promote, like I'm part of your political group. And things become a lot more tribal. Humans are naturally tribal. So if you don't have these merit-based systems, you get the tribal-based systems instead. And so you have in our government these massive tribal-based things going on that are all around these virtue signaling. And so, yes, the pendulum in public has swung back away from that stuff, but those people are still running all these departments. So it's a mess.
Okay, so if we've got some institutional problem where we've got activists that are finding their way into positions that are really going to influence policy, and we've got a national narrative problem, how do we begin to unwind this?
Well, I think this is what you see people like Elon at Doge and others trying to do with President Trump. Is first of all, you have to fire a lot of the people who should never been there in the first place because they've overhired and they have a lot of bloat, and there's a lot of just people who are not there based on merit, based on skill. So you have to replace a lot of people, and then you have to ideally put back in tests. I mean, that would be the ideal thing to do. And, I think this Supreme Court, if they could take a proper case to it, would very clearly affirm, wait a second, we do need merit in this country. It's not against any kind of law to have basic tests and to have skills that are required to run our government. And you have seen an executive order on this already to stop using disparate impact, right? So to understand what happens here, there might be like a fire department in a small town and says, we want people who can understand how to like follow the rules and procedures for how to handle a fire. So there's going to be a written test just to make sure a basic competence around these things. And that test happens to screen out more people of one race than another, even though it's not racial. And so the last administration, the Biden administration, was coming in and suing all these small towns and saying, no, you can't have these tests anymore, which I think is absolutely insane, right? It's crazy, right? And so it's called disparate impact. And so the Trump administration got rid of that theory. And now the question is, can we actually put in appropriate tests in these different areas? And can we put in accountability? Can we reward people for success? Can we punish for failure? Just like the same thing you do in our companies, can we do some of that in the government? And this is a big battle. I mean, the government unions are major donors to the Democrats. They're a very powerful base for the Democratic Party. These people on the government side vote like 90% to the left. So it's a huge battle. And it's being fought right now. And I hope we stay bold because they scream really loud. They fight really hard. And a lot of people say, Joe, it's not worth a fight. We have other things to focus on. And for me, it is worth a fight. We have to make our government smart and competent again and neutral again. So we'll see what we can do.
Man, I'll be very curious to know what people think that we should be focusing on. I have a theory that is people need to be chased by a lion. If you want to get people to not have stupid operating systems running in their brain, there needs to be a clear and present danger to which they are held accountable. So in a business, the clear and present danger is I can't make payroll. So I've got to make something that people actually want at a price that they're willing to pay, or I can't make payroll. And that is the world's worst feeling ever. And so you find yourself focusing, wanting the best and the brightest, doing things that you know work. And it's incredible when it works. I mean, what it yields is as close to magic as you're going to get. Longtime listeners of my show will have heard me say this before, but entrepreneurship is the ability to create a system where you've got inputs that yield outputs that are better than the inputs. Like, that's crazy. And to be able to do that is so difficult that thinking of it as bordering on magical is the right way. It's really, really difficult. So, all right, then the question becomes, what is that lion in the public sphere? And for me, and I've come to this way later than you, so I held on to my naivete a lot longer in terms of, this is great, China's amazing, couldn't be happier, really want to go, bucket list, like just was so enthralled watching their rise. It was really breathtaking. And then one day I realized, whether I want a lion or not, I think we're going to get one in the shape of China. And we really aren't prepared for this. Do you think that the competition with China is going to sharpen us, or is the competition with China dangerous?
Yeah, Tom, that's a great way of putting it, because I do agree you need a lion chasing you on these things. And I think there are definitely areas where it's a really great thing that actually forces the right and the left in the US together to embrace things like merit, to embrace things like making our defense functional, making our country functional. However, it's also extremely dangerous. And in a lot of ways, China's, I think the right word is rapacious. I mean, let's just look at the bio sector for one. So America has by far the most innovative biotech sector in the world. They have a lot of the very best research in the world. A lot of the best and brightest have come here over the last several decades. And we've created the vast majority of big pharma companies and big breakthroughs that positively impact, billions of lives. And here's what's happening, though, is China is going after the entire innovation sector in bio. And they're not doing it in a way that's like, oh, it's fair competition. What they're doing is they say, oh, look, America has a slow FDA that takes, 8 years to get through to make a drug, or 12 years to make a drug, depending on what it is. And they said, if we can make ours only take 3 or 4 years and go faster, for example, let's say I invest $100 million to my friends in a new, really exciting, therapy that's going to, save a bunch of kids from rare disease or whatever it is. And it's going to be worth, $5 billion if we succeed. China sees that and says, oh, you've been working on it for a year. It's starting to go really well. It's going to take you a decade to get through. And we're going to go after that same target now with our new company in China. And we're going to go really fast through our regulator because we've sped it up because FDA in US is slow. And we're going to get the result and we're going to sell it to Pfizer or sell it to GSK or whoever for a couple $1 billion before you even get past your own FDA. And this is what they're doing. Even just 2 days ago, another $1 billion plus sale. And they're going after our research and our companies, and they're taking advantage of it. And it's very clever of them in one way, but another way, this is terrible, because if they're going to do that, then people like me are not going to keep putting lots of money from our funds into these bio things that they're just going to steal anyway. And so this is a huge crisis for our innovation sector in America. And we have to find ways to A, speed up our own FDA, sure, but B, we probably shouldn't be allowing them to operate asymmetrically and going after our stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I have a rule in my life that I will never utter the words slow down so I can lead. And if China is handing us our ass, then we've got to approach it from the perspective of, listen, these guys are killing it. They're handing us our ass. They're playing the game better than we are. We've got to adjust. If they're using corporate espionage to steal things, that becomes very different. So is this China's just out competing us and we better step up? Or is China sending literal corporate spies to steal the technology?
It's literally both. I mean, it's literally both. They are stealing things left and right. They are spying on everything. They are copying everything they can. And after copying and after taking back what we figured out and after stealing our target that the US spent all this money on, they're also then iterating on it faster. So it's actually the worst of both worlds. It's like there's a form of it that would be like a fair competition, but then it's a fair competition plus all the stealing, which makes it very difficult to compete against when you combine those two.
What makes them so good at high-tech manufacturing, at doing things at scale, at moving so fast? Like, I understand that part of my youth was a story. It was a lie. It wasn't actually true. But growing up, I felt about America the way when I look at China now, I'm like, yo, we now feel like this slow, lumbering, fat kid, and they feel like super sharp, moving quickly. They understand the game. They are playing to win. They understand we are in a competition. Like there's a level of ferocity from them that I respect that I don't see here. What are they getting so right that allows them to scale like that?
You can't have more than one God in a culture, and our culture used to embrace this sort of like fierce competition and building and common sense and getting things done. And our culture now does not embrace that. Like when you go and try to get a permit, and if it's taking way too long and you like complain in a blue city, they laugh at you. They don't care, right? And this is just tolerated. Like in America 30 years ago or in China today, like that bureaucrat would lose their job. I mean, in China, they'd probably be shot or something. It's like, I'm sorry, but I'm not necessarily, you shouldn't shoot people, but like, I mean, come on. This is disgusting, right? And it's like, it's just fine. It's just no big deal. It's just like, if you want to tolerate mediocrity and you want to say, oh, well, what's more important here is you're a white cisgendered male who's like trying to already built a lot of other things. And he's just so obsessed with his privilege. You should just like be quiet and like sit on the side. Like there's literally apparently a lot of voters who think that way. And so it's like, we've just had this like weird ideology that's crept in and it's getting in the way of merit and common sense and competition. And it drives me crazy. I mean, we were the faster ones. And now it's like this retarded political class. It's just allowing it to be broken. So yeah, I'm very frustrated because I still think that a lot of us could compete and beat them, but we need to clear this like detritus out of the way. And people aren't willing to do it. Like they vote for the idiots. I don't get it, man.
We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, I want you to imagine if your workout felt more like playing a video game than grinding through a routine. Most people struggle to stick with their fitness routines, not because they're lazy, but because they are bored out of their minds. The human brain craves novelty and challenge, and Averon has solved this problem in a brilliant way. This is honestly one of the coolest innovations I have seen. Averon transforms workouts into interactive games that make working out fun. I'm talking about immersive worlds, competitive challenges, and reward systems that leverage game psychology to keep you motivated. You can race friends in real time, climb global leaderboards, or explore stunning virtual environments. Averon is also more than just rowers. Check out their gamified treadmill and bike for the same addictive experience with different movements. Averon is offering their best prices of the year right now, so click the link below and use code IMPACT50 for an additional $50 off any Averon product. Again, that's code IMPACT50 for an extra $50 off. And now, let's get back to the show.
All right, well, talk to me about Palantir, Anduril. You founded Palantir. You were early investor in Anduril, both focused on defense. How have you been able to pull that off, given that you're still in a broken system?
So basically, after the primes consolidated, like we talked about, and you had these like very dominant companies that became bureaucratic arms of the government, it became very clear to us they were starting to embrace things that were not based on merit. I mean, you go like see all the tradings at places like Lockheed, and they were like really focused on DEI, really focused on all the white men had to learn about their privilege, and as opposed to like spending time on how to be the very best, right? So these places themselves got to be very corrupt, and there were really only two companies that broke through at first. Like a lot of people tried, but really Palantir and SpaceX were the two companies, and they were so much better. They were so much better that they eventually kind of shamed their way through. In each case, though, Tom, both Palantir and SpaceX separately had to sue the government for illegally trying to block them. Like we caught them doing things that were, crazy. Isn't that crazy? And this is actually
how doing it because it was an ideological difference.
You know, it was much more about just like, it's how they've always done things is they work with their friends and they give contracts to places that their friends went and worked. And you literally had with Palantir, this deployment in Iraq that was like helping find all the IEDs for the special forces and saving their lives. And the Army Brigade said, oh, can you go with us too? our bosses won't let us pay you, of course, because, with they want to give all the money to their friends. But we said, of course, like, we're patriots. Here's a system for free. Just like report back, give us feedback. And they showed us how we were saving massive numbers of lives by automatically, like, bringing together, communication from the British and the French and different parts of America deployments, and really reduce a lot of the lives lost. And it was wonderful. And then, of course, when it finally came up to like bid out the new defense ground control system, of course, they gave the $5 billion contract, like no contest, right away to their friends at Raytheon.
Oh, I thought for sure you were going to say, and that's how we got our beachhead.
No, exactly. They give it. So of course they give it to the big company. And it turns out there actually were laws passed in Congress that they had to consider off the shelf software. They had to consider working with new entrants. But of course they're like, oh, we can't work with a new entrant. We always just give it to one of the primes. And so we actually won the lawsuit. You know what's crazy is the general in charge told them to destroy the records of Palantir saving lives. But fortunately, we and another person on the Army side had kept a secret copy. And so they tried to assert that that never happened. And then we showed it, and the judge was horrified on our behalf. And so we just crushed them, obviously, because they were just liars. And then eventually Palantir, wins the program. And it was fascinating to me is that once Palantir finally got in and finally was running all this stuff, all these people said, wow, you guys actually are way better. We were told by everyone that you were schemers and not complete and broken and not, all bad in all these ways. And so they're very, very good at bad mouthing their opponents and trying to keep you out. But here's what's happened, Tom, and this is optimistic. So Palantir breaks through. It starts to really win over the last 8-9 years. SpaceX, I mean, if you have to be blind not to see it, right? They're doing things at 1/100th the cost. Like, I think more things have been sent to space by SpaceX than anyone else at this point. Obviously better. And these things are so much better. They kind of laid these train tracks and said, so a lot of generals, a lot of admirals, a lot of them are really good guys. They care about our country. They're patriots. They're there for the right reasons. And there's still some merit left in the military for sure. So these people say, wait a second, these new things are way better. And then Anduril comes along, and it's just like running circles around the primes, is doing things for like, an eighth the costs that are clearly better in every way. And so Anduril now is a big new prime. And then that's actually opened it up. We have like 7 or 8 new companies valued over $1 billion. I've started a couple more of them that are, one of them, for example, Epirus. I don't know if you've heard of this one yet, but we're able to We're able to turn off enemy drones miles away. So swarms of drones, which is how warfare works right now. It's like magic. We did a contest against the primes. The guys didn't take us seriously. Like, oh, we're the primes. Why are you guys here? We shot down the hardened drones 9.5 times further away for the same power and size. Just wipe the floor with them.
Literally never understand what the worldview is that somebody at that kind of classic prime is running. You're going up against the best and the brightest coming out of Silicon Valley, which is shown over the last God knows how many decades that they out innovate everybody. And so I don't know if they're just thinking, oh, you guys can do Instagram, Facebook, but you can't translate that.
That's what it is. That's what it is. I mean, they you guys are software guys. We build the arsenal of democracy. I'll give you another one. Saronic is this company we started a few years ago, and it's already delivering, hundreds of boats now to the Navy and teaching them how to use AI. But this is a very new thing. No one's done that from Silicon Valley before. And to be honest, it's not just Silicon Valley. We needed talent that came from the advanced manufacturing world. We needed talent that came from the Navy. The guy running it's a Navy SEAL, and we're doing things that the primes can't do. And this, by the way, China has 200 times our shipbuilding capacity. So that's why I'm as fast as I can. I want to prove we can build thousands of ships again. We're going to do it the next year or two.
Yeah, this is where I think the national mythology of what World War II was for us has lingered for so long that people don't realize that, yes, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, we were able to shift this incredible manufacturing area of the economy over to wartime stuff. We don't have it anymore. And so all of that has atrophied, gone away, been shipped overseas. And so as I started watching the rise of China, and it clicked over in my head that, well, hold on a second. These guys, I would clock them as current rivals that could become adversaries. That's where I'm like, the fact that they can make 200x the number of ships that we make, that sounds like us back in World War II.
Exactly.
But now it's not us. It is our adversary. What happened to our adversaries when we did it? They lost. And so it's like, yo, this is a little too predictable if we don't start building these capabilities back up, whether it's Anduril and what they're doing with shipbuilding. When you're spinning that up, are you guys thinking specifically about China and that being this inevitable threat on the horizon? Are you thinking, no, it doesn't matter who it is. We just need to be prepared for anything and everything that could come at us? How do you guys think through that?
Well, listen, I think the Islamists around the world are a major threat. I think the communists are a major threat. I think those are the two biggest totalitarian philosophies. It's actually scariest to me when they work together. But we're going to be facing, our grandkids will still be facing Islamists as a major problem. I think we don't take it seriously enough. And then our grandkids will probably still be facing some form of communism as well. It seems to be a recurring kind of like broken part of the human brain to want this if it's not educated properly, right? Thomas Jefferson thought the whole point of having public school was to teach against the ills of despotism, which is basically another form of like teaching against the ills of authoritarianism and communism, right? So it's like, ironically, our public schools teach the opposite now. I think we encourage our kids.
That didn't go as planned.
we need to recapture those. We're working on, that's a whole other issue we're working on. But Saronic especially was created because Dino and I and a few people around us in touch with our friends who run the Navy said, wait a second, exactly, we're going to lose if we don't actually make thousands of ships. And by the way, a warship in 2025 should look completely different than a warship in 2000 because you don't need people on it. You don't. And so that means you could design it much cheaper. You could have way more firepower. We have a new 150-foot boats we're working on. We bought a big shipyard in Louisiana. We're putting a few $100 million into it. We're building these 150-footer autonomous ones, and it has all sorts of different possible configurations for different types of weaponization. There's all sorts of different types of controls. We actually hired some people who came from like the gaming world, of course, because you want both people who know how naval battles work, but also for command and control. It's a whole different design for how you deploy and use AI and how you control hundreds of these at once in any kind of battle scenario.
That is so interesting, Joe, because
right?
I build video games. I know we talked very briefly before we started rolling. The thought that the things that we have to figure out in terms of how to get an enemy to act intelligently, that would play out in real military, isn't that fun? Fascinating. Sorry,
I was always a fan.
That's very interesting.
I was a big video game guy. I was a fan of Ender's Game, like from Orson Scott Card and all these things. And you actually have to simulate in the water though, because there's things like rogue waves that just destroy your ships when they're sprinting and stuff. So you actually have to practice a lot in the water and then echo it and then practice again and echo it. You don't just want to simulate. It's really dangerous. You can make a lot of mistakes. It's an engineering. Engineering is about scarcity, right? If you want to build a bridge, this thing is an important point for people. If you want to build a bridge, it's very easy to build a bridge on anywhere that will stay up no matter what, if you have infinite resources, right? You spend $1 billion on your bridge, just tons of metal. Fine, you have a bridge, it's going to work. But engineering is about how can you build that bridge that's just as good for $20 million, and therefore you can make 50 bridges. And in a war, it's like how can you make thousands of these things that can work together by doing them more elegantly and cheaply. And so there's some cases where you want something underwater, but for the same cost, you might be able to have 100 small things above the water. That's going to be more useful in some cases. So you definitely want both.
Mm. Now, you guys got into this when the prevailing attitude was that working for a defense company was immoral. One, how did you think in a contrarian way, what facts were stacking up? And then what are the ethics and morality of building weapons?
Yeah, no, this is a great point. So when we started Palantir, of course, we were more on the software side. And even I have to admit, growing up in the Western culture, in Silicon Valley, in California, I was very squeamish about weapons. I mean, you've seen all the bad guys in the movies make weapons. And so Palantir is like, well, we're going to stop the bad guys. We're going to protect civil liberties. We're just doing software. So we're okay. We kind of got around that problem. And then we saw Xi Jinping as a crazy communist. We saw China building all of these really advanced new things with the top engineers. And we saw our defense companies were declining. We're not hiring any of our best and brightest friends. We said, wait a second, this is a really big crisis. And so 3 of our former Palantir guys partner with Palmer Luckey, start Anduril, and kind of clicked like, wait a second, if we're patriotic and America is going to be around and be a dominant force and not fall the next 20 years, we have to do this. And it was really hard. Even for a lot of my team, it was hard. We do a lot in like bioinnovation, which I was talking about earlier. We do a lot in other areas of tech that not related to defense. I think some of those people, especially the people in the bio world, said, if you guys are going to do defense, we don't want to be your friends anymore. It's just evil. We're trying to save lives. You're trying to destroy lives. And it was like, no, guys, like actually it's good for the good guys to not lose to the bad guys. And so I'm going to work on this. And it was a tough conversation to have. And, it wasn't really until the Russia-Ukraine thing that the zeitgeist really flipped and that people realized that you need to do this. But it was interesting for a few years there. It was very contrarian.
Yeah, there's no doubt. How do you personally think about the idea of maximum lethality? I recognize that this is a fact of the human existence, that people are going to come and take your life and your resources if they can. That's just history bears that out over and over and over. And at the same time, like yesterday, there was something, I think it was Trump or the White House that posted, and it was like, don't worry, we haven't forgot about jihadis. And then it just showed a video of like 10 of them or whatever getting taken out by presumably a drone or something. And it's like, damn, like that was just 10 people that they existed and then they stopped existing.
We helped do that thousands of times with Obama and others, because, if mercy for the evil bad guy is cruelty to the innocent, right? And this is a very important part of being an adult, is to be able to grapple with these things. And I think we have very few adults in our society versus 80 years ago. I think during World War II, it was very obvious like what you had to do. And I think a lot of people now, they have this like extended adolescence. They never really grow up, never really have to make these tough choices. And this is important for war. It's important for terrorism. But Tom, it's also important in our cities. I mean, just here in Austin, just last week, there was this 30-year-old Indian kid who was this great entrepreneur. He'd turned down top jobs to be here building his company. He went on a bus, and a homeless guy who'd committed over like a dozen felonies in the past stabbed him in the neck and killed him. And why was a homeless guy who committed a dozen felonies out? For the same reason that people are afraid to kill the jihadis who are going to kill us, right? For the same reason they're afraid to work on defense, is that they want to have mercy for the guilty. They feel bad for the bad guys. I'm sorry, but once someone's committed multiple felonies, you got to put them in jail. And once a jihadi is very clearly trying to kill us, you got to kill him. Otherwise, that poor innocent kid, his family's distraught, his friends are distraught, and he was just killed for no reason because we're too afraid to put bad guys in jail. And it drives me crazy.
I saw a video the other day of a Muslim who was like, we are specifically coming into liberal countries because we know that we can come in and we'll be welcomed, and then we will slowly become more of the population. He didn't say politically and economically powerful, but that was like the idea. We're just going to grow and expand and essentially take over the space. And the interviewer said, well, how would we be allowed as a Christian to go to your country and do the same? And he chuckled and was like, don't think because you're liberal that we're liberal. We would never put up with that. And I was like, oh, damn, like that's a thing. So what do you think about what Douglas Murray calls the strange death of the West? The way that there's the notion of empathetic, suicidal empathy.
Yeah. No, Douglas Murray, honestly, is a good friend. He's someone I really admire. I think he's written some of the most important books on these topics. And suicidal empathy is obviously a massive problem coming from the left, especially right now, although I think a lot of our people make the mistake too. And it's a paradox of liberalism. We've been talking about this for a century or more. You want to be a liberal society, but if you tolerate illiberalism, if you tolerate the authoritarians coming in and pushing things, then it's going to break you eventually. It's, by the way, I'm a chairman of a new university that is attracting a lot of very top students, very top professors. And we debate this a lot because the goal of a university, just like the goal of like how you run your country, it's to be open. It's to be liberal in the classical sense. It's to pursue the truth. It's to have dissenting viewpoints and learn how to have humility and debate. And you want to include everyone. Like, I don't mind if there's a professor who's a communist next to a professor who's a free market person, as long as that communist professor isn't trying to stop people he disagrees with from coming in. And right. So as soon as you have that illiberalism, as soon as you have that attempt to block others and to conquer, and this is what's happened, by the way, at all of our universities, because it's the same idea you just talked about. If you look at the top 100 universities in the country, the vast majority of their departments got to be 51% or more illiberals, some version of communists, some version of socialists, whatever. And then they don't let anyone else get hired who doesn't agree with them. And suddenly you have departments that are like 18 kind of commies to maybe one moderate. And there used to be one Republican there, but he died, right? Because he was the old history professor or whatever. And now you have a whole departments with only one point of view, and they're brainwashing our kids. And it's like these places are broken. And so if a liberal place tolerates illiberalism, then it becomes illiberal. And that the university should be a warning sign for our entire society. We have to be very careful. We should not be letting in immigrants from these places that are illiberal. It's crazy to be bringing people from Somalia who have those views. It's crazy to be bringing people in general from a lot of other parts of the world with illiberal views. And they're very misogynistic cultures. They're very broken cultures. So and Europe's basically committing suicide. It's very frustrating.
If you had to rank order the threats to the U.S. specifically, but the West in general, top 2 or 3, what would you rank order them?
This is really hard. I think I did this like quiz on my X the other day, and I think the one that people voted as the biggest problem was the immigration Islamist issue, and I do agree that's a really big problem. What's really tied to that is the polarization and dysfunctional government issue. I tend to think if we can actually make our government more functional and we can find a way to collaborate between the moderate sides and have this like merit-based kind of common sense government, I think that we'd be able to work together to like solve all the other issues, right? Because I mean, listen, there's AI threat we can talk about, and I'm very bullish and optimistic on AI, but there's obviously ways people could use it to do terrible things. But I think to me, it's the government issue is the biggest, but then if you don't solve that, you're just going to get swamped like Europe and you're going to lose your liberal society.
So you're more worried about internal own goals versus rise of China, rise of Islamism. You're more focused on, we got to get ourselves right internally.
Listen, the threats are very clearly to me, it's the internal own goals and lack of merit and dysfunctionality. It's probably China as an adversary and the problems there, because it's just a very active, rapacious adversary that's destroying things actively right now. The longer term, it's probably the Islamists and the immigration stuff. And we had this crazy activist party that Elon and others have talked about a lot, where every part of the government's funding migrants secretly to come here and to swamp things and to shift things more towards the kind of leftist authoritarian direction that other countries tend to vote. And so all of these are very big problems. They're all tied together. And my goal, so I have something called the Cicero Institute, where I have teams in over 20 states. I have a lot of people working and helping in DC. And this is all about just like moderate, common sense, incentives, accountability, fixing things. We're very public online about, I think we have over 50 laws that already passed this year in different states, and just like making government smarter and more functional and less stupid. And I think that's actually like the prerequisite for solving the rest of these problems.
And so I think a lot about China. That is admittedly my personal obsession. There's two things I worry about: money printing because of all the downstream consequences, including war. And then I think about China, their rise, Thucydides' trap, where the US as a declining power just is not going to accept that. China as a rising power is not going to accept it. We see the clash with the tariff war. And China saying, cool, we're here for any kind of war you want. Now, I'm sure that some of that was bluster, but how realistic is it, do you think, that tensions could escalate in Thucydides' trap between us and China?
Thucydides' trap's a great model to think about history. It's a system level thing. I agree these systems really matter, but I guess I deeply believe in the great man theory of history, Tom. And I think thanks to a small handful of great men shifting the conversation, changing what's possible, men like President Trump, who's really shifted the entire nation around this China issue, if we're honest about it, men like Elon Musk, who have made us completely dominant in space, which is critical for warfare, men like Palmer Luckey, who took the stuff we did with the Palantir talent and has this whole new thing he's built out, which is a dominant defense company, which is running circles around everyone. It's just amazing stuff. Men like Dino Mavroukas, who's actually, partner with us. He's actually going to build thousands of ships that are more advanced than China. It's happening. And men like our Navy Secretary Phelan, and others who step in and say, I am going to fix how the Navy works. I'm going to actually rise to the occasion, take this billionaire who can do anything he wants to from the private sector, going in, for basically no money, just doing it out of service. You have a lot of really great men, great people, obviously, in America who are going to shift this, and I think who can shift this. And so I'm optimistic that it's possible to avoid this kind of like nasty decline, destruction, but we really have to fight for it.
Okay. So is that a combination of peace through strength, and we can pull out of the decline economically by just getting our shit together, not letting ourselves be taken advantage of by China or by Europe not paying their share, et cetera, et cetera?
It's peace through strength. And then this is the big question. Can we get our shit together? Can we take this culture and wrangle it back towards merit? Can we wrangle it back towards kind of the more traditional American, a little bit boastful, a little bit arrogant? We're just going to build, and we're going to do it ourselves. We're not going to wait for permission. We're not going to wait for the committees to tell us what to do. We're not going to have a government gets to decide everything and slow everything down. Like, can we shift back towards that kind of like entrepreneurial, dynamic, frankly, more masculine culture versus waiting around and being really careful not to offend everyone, right? So I think if we can shift it back in that direction, we're going to win. And if we can't, then the civilization is going to decline. And it's really tough, because obviously it's nice to be nice to people. It's nice to have kindergarten types of situations where we don't make people feel bad, and we're prioritizing feelings, and we're prioritizing, waiting and being really careful. But that's great for kids, and it's great for maybe certain things, but that actually destroys the culture as a whole. If we're going to make it be based on that, we're going to lose if we base it around that. We need to have great men in charge, and that's where we have to be.
All right. Now I'll try asking a very pointed question. Do you think China will make a move that we will have to respond to militarily in the next 5 years?
I think the jury is still out on that. It really depends on what we decide to do. I think there's these system level things that frankly people in Russia think about as well, where is there a stable system of deterrence, and is there a situation where both sides don't feel forced into anything, or are some of our moves so dominant, with the Golden Dome and with AI, that we have some kind of tech supremacy and they have to respond sooner. And there's kind of this really weird high level game of chess that both sides are playing, and both sides are we keeping them comfortable along the way, or are we exposing ourselves by not deterring them a certain way while showing that if they don't attack, we're going to be dominant, right? So there's all these games they're playing in their heads to figure out, and how we manipulate the chessboard and how we work on it. You could steer it correctly towards peace, and you could steer it accidentally towards kind of tripping them off. And I think Biden's administration was very sloppy with Russia and Ukraine and did trip them off because they had this chessboard signaled in all the wrong ways, and they weren't even thinking at these high levels. I think they weren't very smart. I think the president wasn't even there. That's a whole other conversation. And so they screwed that up with Russia, Ukraine. Hopefully we have some very smart people with Rubio and with the president and with others around him right now in the National Security Council. I hope they can actually get this right with China and not have any kind of battles like that. But I think China is definitely looking to do something to try to shame us and to try to break through if necessary.
In the peace through strength angle, what elements, if any, do you think from a manufacturing standpoint, we absolutely must either onshore or friendshore?
There's a lot. There's a lot of probably refining for rare earth metals. We need millions of motors. We were talking earlier about engineering. You need to be able to build, not just thousands, but millions of some of these smaller drones and smaller other ships and other types of things. And a lot of that right now, we're still somewhat reliant on the rare earth refining. It's a very messy, nasty thing. I actually think the right way to do this, Tom, which we might do, is actually have the DoD itself partner to build some on their own land, because otherwise the environmental regulations are going to be too tough. So this is one of those catch-22s. And anyway, we probably should build that. So it's rare earth stuff. There's just obviously shipbuilding. And then there's, just other parts of the drones. Other than that is really key. I think Eric Schmidt has a great program to try to help in Ukraine, and he's building hundreds of thousands of drones per year in Mexico because there's no supply chain in the US that works for it, and he needs to use some of China. So just reshoring a bunch of that stuff. And, in general, I really like the idea of letting people write off capital expenditures for manufacturing as opposed to depreciate over time. And I love the idea of startups being able to kind of take those write-offs and sell them to big companies. And so what that does is it would allow us to invest in a lot more manufacturing with new companies. And so there's programs like that they might do, which would then create the ability for me and others to put billions of dollars to work from funds into new advanced manufacturing, which is what we need. I guess the other thing I'd say is biomanufacturing, absolutely critical. All of our penicillins relying on China. All these things we need in a crisis we can't make right now. We should definitely be putting more money into advanced biomanufacturing. So there's things like that are national security threats. We're actually working on monkeys. This sounds crazy, but China stopped sending us the monkeys. And this is a really controversial one, by the way, because to hear someone's working on monkeys, that's an evil person. What are they doing to those poor monkeys? This is terrible. But I asked my 5-year-old, I say, listen, if mommy had a bad disease and we could try to test curing the cure on mommy, and it might kill her or it might help her, or we could test it on the monkey first to make sure it wouldn't kill anyone. Do you want me to test it on mommy or the monkey? They say, test it on the monkey. And that's, and China stopped sending us monkeys. So we're not, so we need things like this too for biosecurity.
Interesting. Was that a clapback for the tariffs? Why'd they stop sending monkeys?
It was after COVID. They used it as an excuse. No, if you look at the data, I could send it as a chart on my X where it's their number of drugs being approved is going up exponential versus us. And so they're really focused on this big bio plan to just take over that sector. And this is a really key input to that sector. And so they've really started to grow massively the last 4 or 5 years in that sector. So I think quietly, they use COVID as the excuse, but quietly they're trying to take out certain parts of the supply chain to bring everything to China and really kind of compete with us in that sector. So it is a strategic move they're making as they start to dominate more there. And it's something we really got to be smart about. And we're working on it with executive orders and others. Hopefully we fix it. But, of course, PETA delays these things for years or two here. There's no PETA over there to delay them from the monkey supply chain. It is what it is. It's like these I don't mind some delays from a democratic system, but it's just ridiculous, man. Sometimes how long things take to get through that you obviously need.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize, I'm sure there must be a ton of areas where we're competing that I'm just completely unaware of, but that sounds like us trying to keep the chips from them coming out of NVIDIA to try to slow them down on AI. If they're making a big bet on bio, trying to slow us down in any way that they can, that's really, really interesting. Are there other battles that we have with China where it's a very meaningful industry and where each of us are trying to cock block the other?
It seems like China tends to fund, and they've been caught funding like BLM and other things. I think they tend to fund things that are divisive in the U.S.
Really?
Right? There's all sorts of ways.
I be surprised, but I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if China was behind some of our more aggressive environmental orgs. You actually found out that Russia was behind some of the UK environmental orgs that were blocking certain things in order to like keep Russia's energy dominance versus the UK. This is a true thing, right? It's very smart. So I think China and Russia take these radical parts of the left and no doubt radical parts of the right as well that wouldn't even exist in some cases and put lots of money into them and play them up to cause divisiveness and to turn things off.
Come on.
Yeah,
we're good at that. That is brilliant, and I have no doubt that we're doing the same. We certainly have our history of regime changes and all that.
We're not, Tom. We used to do the same. We used to do the same. We did all sorts of like crazy things in the past. We're not really doing the same now. I mean, the problem is all these orgs around our government since 1980, like I told you, they've gotten stupider. Like I used to think like there must be genius things going on our side and we're amazing and we're doing all this clever stuff. And no. These people are retarded. The best thing that happens for a lot of our intelligence agencies with they make things confidential and top secret in order for them not to get caught being stupid because they're so dumb that you can't criticize them if it's confidential. And these things have fallen
first.
So these things have fallen.
We now even suck at like causing distress in other nations.
We are much worse at it. Like the Voice of America started being more progressive. This whole thing was supposed to be like patriotic, like how great we are. And you get like trans shit on the Progressive Voice of America, which was supposed to be, it's like the opposite of what it's supposed to be. It just drives me crazy. This stuff has gotten dumber and it's a big problem. This is why you need to completely redo a lot of parts of the government with a merit-based framework with an accountability-based framework. Because I mean, it's gotten a lot dumber, man. It's a big problem.
We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, there's a window of opportunity that won't stay open forever. Shopify's AI tools are literally doing the work that used to require entire teams. Need product descriptions? The AI writes them for you. Web design? Choose from hundreds of templates and customize them instantly. Product photos need enhancement? Shopify's AI handles all of that as well. Shopify is not just an e-commerce platform anymore. It's like having a marketing department, design team, and operations expert all working for you 24/7. And that's why Shopify now powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from giants like Mattel and Gymshark to solo founders just getting started. So turn your big business idea into reality with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/impact. Again, go to shopify.com/impact. And now let's get back to the show. Wow. Well, that's not what I wanted to hear. I at least admittedly held in my back pocket that, okay, they do this stuff, but we do it back and we're sort of the kings of it.
I don't think so.
Apparently not. Think so. That's distressing. Well, what do you think about like USAID? Was that us doing this kind of thing just really stupidly? Or was that sort of the last bastion of us manipulating the rest of the world?
I think USAID had done some things very cleverly a couple generations ago. And then I think USAID, by the way, did save millions of lives in Africa in a pretty efficient way during the Bush administration. And I think that's something you have to give them credit for, as whether you're Christian or Jewish or believe in God in some other way. Like, I think that like a good thing to have done in Africa. It helped a lot of people. If you look at USAID today, it was extremely politicized. The vast majority of money was going to NGOs and others that have no accountability, in many cases making a lot of people rich who ran African governments, a lot of money coming back to NGOs and a lot of the leftist orgs in the US. And so the whole thing had gotten to just be extremely corrupt. The problem with other people's money is that there's no accountability. Over time, people just take more and more and more of it. And, it was tied to this other culture. I think it's an important context. Tony West, Kamala's brother-in-law, was working in the Attorney General's office for Obama. And they came up with a new idea under Obama that whenever there's a big settlement, rather than the companies having to pay the settlement to the government, they could pay half as much to an NGO. And then they had this big list of NGOs that the government made, but all of them were run by their friends, were run by the Democratic Party activists. And so this was like the first $15 billion insertion into these NGOs in a way where it's like, wow, this is really great for our power and our friends and our influence and culture. And we're going to support all these new things. And this is really the start of the woke movement with all this money. And they got addicted to it. And so when Biden came back in with Kamala, they turned it up. It was all of a sudden hundreds of billions. And USAID was like part of that trend. We're like, let's do whatever we can. It's like a new business now to fund all of our friends and all of their influence. And Stacey Abrams gets several $1 billion to do what she wants. And Democratic people in California get $8 billion for all their environmental stuff, which is just all their friends' orgs. And so USAID was part of this massive grift scam and massive influence scam that, thank goodness, we're able to come in and turn off. And we still haven't turned off most of it. The judges are desperately trying to defend it, the activist judges on the left, but hopefully we'll be able to turn off most of it because it's trash, man. It's horrible.
All right. So if we're trying to inject a better way of thinking into the government, you have either founded or been a part of an absurdly long list of hyper successful companies. You've talked about Elon and Palmer Luckey as having an ability to make things in the physical world that is pretty unparalleled. What is it in the way you think, and I'm not looking for the humble answer, I'm looking for the answer I can steal, that the government can bake into the soul of what they do? What is that thing that makes that success so repeatable?
Well, you take the talent that's the best in the world and you give them resources and you give them accountability. Like you said, the lion chasing them. I think you said it really well. Like who's the top talent? How do you build a very, very top culture that inspires the other top people to be there? And it's chicken and egg. If you start with, three of our best guys from Palantir and Palmer, then a lot of great people want to join them and they know great people too, right? And here's what you have to do is you have to identify gaps, Tom, that we're confident are gaps. Like it was very obvious when Anduril started to those of us on the inside that there's a massive gap, like what a top group could do versus the decadence and kind of government bureaucratic nature of the other primes. It was obvious it was a great thing to go after. So that for me, that's really the two biggest things in everything I do. It's what's the conceptual gap in the world where something can be done so much better, and how do you build a truly great technology culture, which is a culture of merit. It's a culture of extremely hard work. It's a culture where people are rewarded for success. It's a place where like the engineers and the technical side are helping run it. This is very important. I think in the old days, you have the business guys in charge and you tell the dork in the basement what to do. And that doesn't work ever for a big business. This is like a mistake everyone always makes. I'm going to find an engineer and I'm going to tell him what to do and I'm going to have a big business. And like, no, doesn't work. You need the engineers running it with you. You need them understanding deeply the possibility frontiers based on the technology frameworks. Then you have to have a culture where these best people want to come there and are inspired to be there. And it's really hard to do without upside. I think the government should be doing more things with top startups where people do have upside. And then when there are things in the government, if you can create incentives, if you can create accountability where people get rewarded. So one of the things we're trying to do for acquisitions in government is if you do work with something that's the new 10X thing and it works and you have a much better result, that's how you should get promoted. Right. So you should just change the frameworks for the acquisition personnel, not just to be super risk averse and always choose the old thing, but let's have competition. By the way, let's have two different groups that choose different things. And let's have the one, if you know there's someone else who's going to be choosing something different, all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is 10 times better. I better look at that. Whereas if you know you're the only person in charge, you're like, I can't get fired for choosing Raytheon. I can't get fired for choosing Northrop. Even if this other thing's way better, it's risky. I'm not going to touch it. But it really comes down to the talent and the cultures.
All right. I want to talk about some of the pillars of those cultures. So as somebody that's run companies with thousands of employees, I know how important the culture is, but the culture at some point has to become quite specific. So you talked about one element that I'm going to assume you actually do, which is, hey, if you're the employee delivering 10x the results, that's exactly how you get promoted. What does a culture that rewards excellence actually look like?
For me, and for the companies I've seen that do really well, everyone should have equity. Everyone should be aligned. People who do really well should get a lot more equity, and you should do it farther out too. It should be a place. These things take 7-8 years to build. So maybe you start with 4 years, but then you quickly add on a lot extra in years 5, 6, and 7. Some people who are really great, they end up getting twice the equity, 3 times the equity, 4 times the equity. And then there's bonuses for things. You want to really reward people for bringing in other great people who work out. I think that's one of the most valuable things you could do. Like I might think I'm really smart and really amazing, but if I hire 5 of the best people in the world who are like just delivering and are crushing it, that's probably more important than anything I could do otherwise myself, even though I'm best in strategy or whatever. But it's like, these people are so amazing that was the most important thing I did in some cases. So, you just got to incentivize the things that are going to make you win. And you want to have cultures of ownership. Palantir is really good at this. It's a very good culture of ownership. You'll throw people in the deep end. You give them a lot of responsibility, and if they can't handle it, then they can't handle it. They're not going to work out. But I think really having that ownership, and you have people mentoring them, helping them, teaching them. But you want to have people as much as possible own things.
And what about somebody like Palmer? What does he get that has allowed him to run circles around the other primes?
I was just talking to him about something last night. He's just, he's just such a bright, energetic, optimistic, creative thinker who really inspires people around him. I think it's first principles thinking, like what's possible here that wasn't before. It's just
for like people, what is first principles thinking?
Just going back to how does the world work and how do these things work and why do they work that way? And like why was it done the way it was originally, and how could it be done differently now based on what's possible? And I think he just has a joy for like engineering and how things work. And it's a contagious thing. When you talk to him, you want to get in there and try to help figure it out too. And just it's like this creative spark of energy of how things work and how they could work if you go back to the very core of why they are what they are. It's a really powerful and kind of generative, creative, fun energy, I think, with him especially.
Okay, so assuming that we can get the government thinking in the right way again, we're building all the things that we need to build. If we wanted to make sure that the U.S. is set up to thrive, what would be the small handful of things? Is it that we need a Navy so that we can keep shipping lanes open again? Is it that we need to win AI? Like, is that like one of the most important things that we could be focusing on?
The end of the month coming up soon, I'm interviewing Mark Andreessen at this Ronald Reagan Economic Forum. I'm on the board of the Reagan Library.
Mark.
And really impressive guy. And, he has this framework for like different eras that we're in, which I think is like partially true, right? So you had this like material industrial era for a long time, especially with the industrial revolutions that accelerated when we built a lot of things. And starting in the 60s and really accelerating in the 70s, all the way through Obama, you basically had the services economy that just grew massively. It changed education, it changed a lot of things. And unfortunately, a lot of things, that's when a lot of this stuff leaked in. They made it harder to build things, but that stuff didn't get challenged as much because the richest and most powerful people were focused on the services side for quite a while there. And now you have, of course, this energy-based era of like intelligence and robotics and all these new possibilities. They're just really accelerating right now, right? So I have like one of my favorite companies is like guys from Waymo, right? The self-driving company, a bunch from left, and they're using AI and robotics to basically like take Caterpillar machines, like construction machines with no one in them, and build roads and build buildings. And it's like, this is clearly already starting to work. It's clearly coming. Like there's so much stuff that's it's be very disinflationary, right? It's going to bring down the cost of everything in our society. If we can make this work, it's going to make people in the middle class live way better. It's just this great energy, but we have to power it with energy. And so I think cheap energy is really important. I think deregulatory stuff to like allow us to actually build things, to allow us to make healthcare cheaper. Healthcare could be so cheap, Tom, we can compete. Like all these things that are kind of broken, education, healthcare, housing costs, those should all be much cheaper the next 10 or 20 years if the government allows them to be, if the government allows that competition, attacks the crony capitalists that are running everything right now and that are locking in laws against us. So I think that's some of the most important stuff to thrive. And then yes, deter the bad guys, have a smart, functional government. Like I don't actually want war to be a thing I think about every day. I have lots of other things I do. The reason like 20% of our fund and a lot of my time goes into defense is that if we don't deter the bad guys, that's like the worst possible outcome for all of us. And then stop the illiberals from breaking things. So, I mean, listen, there's a lot of battles to fight, but I'm very optimistic on this new wave that's coming that, we're talking about with Mark, where we're both kind of investing in this new wave where it is going to make everything so much better if we can get the government not to break things.
How good is AI going to be really?
And my intuition has been that it's like an asymptote, right? Where it just like gets a little better, but it hasn't yet. It's like kept making these jumps. And so I'm really excited. I'm a little bit scared. My intuition is that it still does like kind of hit a wall at some point, or at least slow down a lot, because I don't think the universe works in exponentials. I think it works in S shapes where it like goes up for a while and comes over. I just don't think the universe is that simple that we've just figured everything out and then we're going to have this crazy super intelligence in like 5 or 10 years. My view is that it keeps getting a little bit better and that it's good enough to like raise productivity a lot. And it's a very good kind of happy medium. But a lot of my smartest friends think we're kind of birthing the Messiah basically. And it's like this religion for them. And that's
really
fascinating and scary.
Do they speak in that language or you just get the vibe?
Some of them speak in that language. Most of them don't use that term because they're secular, right? But for me, it's messianic in the way they do speak about it. Like that would be the correct adjective to describe how they're speaking about what's coming in the next 10 years. And a few of them use it, most of them don't. But again, this is not my view. I think it's just this majorly important productivity wave, but that doesn't actually completely create a God that's 1,000 times smarter than us. But there are some people who think that we're going to get something like that. And if we do, then we're living at the end of times. But that's like it's what it is. I don't think that's the case.
Wow, crazy. I want to talk about courage. So you've started a university. It seems the University of Austin. It seems partly out of a sense of the value system of education has become warped. But I want to look at Elon Musk through that lens, somebody who you've said has put his own life at risk, that he obviously didn't need to do any of this stuff for money, but he's made himself wildly unpopular with a certain part of the world. And that's literally become both very costly and dangerous for him. When you think of him through the lens of courage, what is courage and why does he exemplify it in your mind?
Elon is obviously motivated by what he thinks is best for our civilization. And he's trying to make our civilization be able to exist on 2 planets as a backup. He's trying to make our civilization more functional and not captured by illiberal forces. I've seen a lot of really smart friends go into government with him, and he's very, very clear. He's about the moral lines, about the ethical lines. Like he cares about these things. He cares about what's right. And yes, you're right. I mean, I think maybe we're not supposed to talk about it too much, but like people keep threatening his life, and he's had a lot of people try to do a lot of horrible things, and it's really changed and hurt his life and really tough on him. But yeah, he has courage. I mean, he has virtue, right? The idea of our classical civilization is there's the 4 classical virtues and the 3 religious virtues. And these things really should be taught, by the way, in school. I mean, we're like, I don't know what the hell we're teaching kids nowadays, but you have to have temperance and wisdom and justice and courage. And I think courage is obviously a central one. Without the rest, you don't get the rest without courage. And this is a big part of what I'm trying to do with University of Austin is we need leaders in our society, obviously who are educated, understand STEM, understand philosophy. Obviously, I think pretty important to understand like the great debates of the West over the last 1,000 years, because there's a lot of wisdom in those debates that if you don't have those, you make really dumb mistakes today. But more than anything else, to have leaders who have the courage to speak up, who say, no, this is wrong, or I'm not going to be part of this. I'm going to speak up. It's so rare nowadays. You just have one person with courage in a situation, it can completely change everyone else. So you have a few people with courage, it goes right.
Why do you think it's so rare? What's happened?
It's something we used to talk about a lot in the 19th century. I think there's like really important balances between masculine and feminine energy in society. I have 5 daughters and 1 son, by the way, and I have amazing daughters. And I think the world would be a very dark place without feminine energy. You probably didn't have enough feminine energy in some of the ways we were too cruel 100, 200 years ago. I would never want to return to being that cruel. But I think it's really important, like yin and yang, that it's in balance. And what's happened is maybe in reaction to the fact that we were too cruel as a civilization, I think we've thrown out a lot of masculine energy to the point where you're mostly, you talk about toxic masculinity, you talk about it as something to attack, but you don't laud it. You don't celebrate it anymore. You don't tell young men to be more manly and to look up to, Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great and being strong and fighting for their values. Like it's is not lauded. So I think our culture has moved in a very feminine direction. I think young women are outperforming young men, and based on everything, as schools work towards the feminine angle. And again, you want healthy feminine energy. I'm very proud of my daughters. I think some of them are hopefully going to be great leaders, but we need in our culture a healthy mix of the masculine and the feminine. And I think we got to go back towards celebrating masculinity, celebrating strong men again, without just attacking them and without having to be apologized for being a strong man.
No, I very much agree with that. How do you, this word might be the wrong choice, but how do you indoctrinate people with that? Like, how do we really put that message out? Is it just people like you, people like Elon, they get up and they talk about it openly and they do things that are obviously courageous? Or are you going to bake this kind of thing into the University of Austin where it's like, we're bringing this back to the forefront?
Yeah, you have to be role models first and foremost. You have to have admired figures who act this way. It has to be a cultural shift. Mark Zuckerberg of all people, was talking about this as well, which even he realizes his workplace had become way too focused on the feminine values and totally discarded the masculine. If even Mark Zuckerberg's saying it, this is obviously an issue. Our schools need to have this too. I think schools have become extremely on the other side of this. And I think we need to rethink about, I think school choice is great. Let's innovate and try new different structures for schools that can celebrate, both sides of this again. I think the movies we make have to celebrate it again. I think right now, any kind of TV show and media, there's always like the goofy, embarrassing dad. There's not like a celebrated, strong, courageous, like male figure. That's not something that we look up to right now in our culture. We have to start making, things again that show that strength and model that strength in our pop culture as well as our everyday lives. So I think you are seeing a push back towards that a little bit. I think we got to take it and run with it and be proud.
Who, living or dead, do you admire?
Oh gosh, all sorts of people. I was lucky to have, Secretary George Shultz as a mentor. He's a little more of an institutionalist than me. He passed at 100 years old a couple of years ago. And he introduced me one time to Lee Kuan Yew, who I think was like probably one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century. Someone there's a lot to learn. Reading the memoirs of this guy who built Singapore from third world to first, took the poorest country, made it the richest country. So much wisdom there, so much strong leadership. Very easy to criticize unless you're in his shoes, seeing the nuances he's dealing with. I think it's really fascinating what he had to do. Ronald Reagan is someone I really admire, his courage. Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, how she took Britain when it was just completely down and out and turned it around. Again, none of these are perfect people, but they did extraordinary things. They had courage, they had wisdom, they brought great people around them. They fought for what they believed in. I think these are all things we should aspire to.
How do you deal with the imperfection of people? So take somebody like George Washington, who I admire to a freakish degree, but obviously held slaves. What do you do with that? People
are subject to their culture at the time. I think we all make the mistakes that our culture makes at our time. And that's something that you have to understand. It's like people are not magical beings that exist outside of time, outside of culture, outside of place. I think he was someone who showed extraordinary courage. He was just a great leader in so many ways. And yes, people are flawed, and people are always caught up in the mimetic nature of their civilization. I think we all are. I think we all have to be more honest to ourselves about our own flaws and our own ways we want to improve, and to constantly be working on those if you want to be greater.
Very fair. Joe, this has been incredible. I pray to sweet baby Jesus that at some point we get to do this again. Where can people follow along with you?
I'm JT Lonsdale on X, and I have an American Optimist podcast. And Tom, it's an honor to be on. Thank you.
Brother, thanks for being here. It's incredible. All right, everybody, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more.
I think the AI censorship wars are going to be 1,000 times more intense and 1,000 times more important.
My guest today is someone who doesn't just keep up with innovation, he creates it. The incredible Marc Andreessen. Trust me, when someone like Marc, who spent his entire career betting on the future, says...